Hello and welcome back to Laughing Through the Pain, Navigating Wellness with me, Richard L. Blake, my co-host Andy Esam, and today we've got Gray Caws with us as our special guest. Gray's based in the UK and he offers a thoughtful approach to breathwork and movement, emphasising the joy and simplicity in these practices. His work is centred on not just surviving, but thriving as a human. And Gray is a master oxygen advantage coach, and we're going to learn a lot more about the oxygen advantage, and a teacher of Qigong and functional movement. And he underscores the importance of sustainable and enjoyable habits that contribute to long-term well-being, steering clear of quick fixes in favour of lasting change. So with that intro, welcome, Gray.
Thank you. Thanks you both for inviting me to your podcast. I'm looking forward to this a lot.
Absolutely. And Andy, welcome back. You have just been on somewhere I sent you. You make it sound like a concentration camp or something.
Yeah, it was
a re-education camp.
It was mind-blowing. I went on the path of love, so thank you for sending me there, Rich. And before we go any further, I'd just like to say very happy birthday to Richard today. And thank you very much, Gray, for being part of the celebrations, because there's nothing Rich likes more than speaking to a fellow breathwork enthusiast.
Yes, you're my present to myself, Gray.
Well, let's hope it lives up to the celebration.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean that's what, as a breath geek, talking about breathwork is that's my kind of Friday night exactly. So yeah, okay. Well, Andy, I just want to tap in. So Andy's just done the Path of Love, which is this amazing 7-day psycho-spiritual retreat that I did a few years ago, and I also trained with the founders, Rafia and Turia, and it really is one of the most transformative processes in the world. I tell everyone to do it. I don't just send Andy on it. I send all my friends. Anyone will do it. So we are hoping to get some of those involved on the podcast in future. But Andy, are you awakened? Have you ascended?
Yeah, I feel like some of I was actually reflecting on some of the ways you use the breath in the week and how powerful that was in terms of breathing right down into your belly, but also I can't remember the term, but it's sort of the frantic breathing, the sort of the kind of no pattern to it,
and the chaotic Osho style. Yeah. And
I found that unbelievable. And you watch someone do it straight off the bat, and you think, what on earth am I looking at? But then when you actually try it yourself, you think, wow, I can't believe what's happening. So I was actually thinking of what a role the breath played in the whole week. But it was a seriously powerful week, and very grateful to have done it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the breath work he's talking about is this Osho meditation called dynamic meditation, and it has several stages. And the first stages of it, or the first 10 minutes, is just breathing through the nose as chaotically and as aggressively and unpatternedly, if that's a word, as possible. And it's trying to get you out of your mind, get you out of your thinking thoughts, and going consciously mad as well. His idea was like, if we go consciously mad, we'll never go unconsciously mad.
Yeah. And actually, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you, Gray, and it's something I've sort of discussed with Rich. Why is it that there's this sort of just this base understanding in the breathwork community that you have to breathe through your nose? Because that's sort of like, it seems to predicate everything that you do in breathwork. And yet people like me don't fully understand why that is.
That's a brilliant question. And I think where I would start with that is it's interesting how you emphasized have to breathe through the nose. So what I would highlight is that the majority of time when you can do, you'll be breathing in and out through the nose, but it's not about forcing, unless it's a particular practice. So maybe this was a particular practice that you were doing where you were deliberately really energizing and stressing the nervous system by forcing the breath in and out through the nose. But in general, if you think 24/7, as much as possible, you want to be breathing in and out through the nose, and you get the benefits of warming the air, filtering the air. I think it's really obvious if you just pull air in through the mouth, as opposed to pull air in through the nose. You can feel it slows it down, it warms the air, and it filters the air, and it kills various bacteria, germs, etc. I'm always amazed in the pandemic that no one ever focused on, or no, certainly in the UK, no scientific advisor said, oh, well, yeah, wear the masks, do whatever. I'm not anti-mask or anti anything like that. But no one ever just said, first point of call, breathe gently, softly in and out through the nose. Because I think what a lot of people were doing were putting masks on and then panicking because they had the masks on, so they were pulling breath in and out through the mouth. I think also what tends to happen is we get it sort of becomes black and white. Oh, I'm a nasal breather, I'm a mouth breather. I guarantee not everyone is just a total mouth breather and not everyone is just a total nasal breather. So there are occasions where a lot of breath work, a lot of the breath work where you are using the mouth to deliberately stress the nervous system. And that's understanding why we're doing that. Also, if you're thinking from an exercise point of view, if you get to the point where you have a buildup of carbon dioxide, then there are going to be those points where you can exhale through the mouth, but it's not that you're going to be doing that all of the time. In Qigong, we use the idea of like cleansing and clearing, which is like a nice full breath in and it's just once or twice you're cleansing and clearing through the mouth, but you're not. So it's the situation you're in that determines obviously the breath rate, the breathing pattern, and how you breathe in an everyday situation. But then there are various breath works where you will say, right, we just nasal breathe or we just mouth breathe. And they're deliberate practices to create a deliberate response, a nervous system response in the body. So I think my starting point is to always distinguish between how you breathe in everyday life, which is one of the focuses that we really work on in Oxygen Advantage, as opposed to what is breath work. And I think a lot of people get a little bit confused, like you talk about, oh, I need to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. So they think, do we do that all day long? Do we do that while we're watching TV? And it's not. It's about focusing on what we call functional breathing. I'm not sure that's a brilliant word, but do you know what I mean? It's like, how are we breathing in every day? But the disadvantages, if you're breathing out through the mouth a lot, is from the point of hydration. Because again, if you look at, say, a runner and they're deliberately breathing out through the mouth, you could dehydrate quicker. And also, it's remembering that we breathe through our metabolic needs. So we want to be breathing just the right volume of air for what you're doing. And again, often people think, oh, I need to breathe out through the mouth, and they end up over breathing because they're breathing a little bit too much air, and then you're lowering your CO2 level. So I hope that vaguely answers your point or gives you some things to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just taking it a step back then. So a lot of people ask their first question, what is breath work? And I always get that question from, people like, I've been breathing for 35 years. I know how to breathe. Like, what are you going to tell me? So can you tell us how your breath work differentiates from things like Wim Hof or the breath work I'm doing my PhD?
I think if this is a really good question. This is something I always think about, is how to explain it as simply as possible. And what I would say is breath work is a particular practice that you spend time doing. So I'm going to go and do 5 minutes nasal breathing to a particular count. So it could be rhythmic breathing, it could be box breathing. So that's actually a specific practice of breath work. So Wim Hof, Conscious Connected, all those are specific practices of breath work. And I like what you said there when you just said that most people would say, and I get this all the time, is like, well, I breathe all the time. The key is, first of all, think about breathing as opposed to breath work. So how are you breathing now? So I will always start off with breath awareness. Now, you could say that that's part of breath work, which it is, because we're actually just bringing attention to the breath. But the first port of call for what I would work with anybody, whether it's groups or one-to-one, is like, how are you breathing now? Don't worry about changing the way you breathe. And then understanding why you're breathing like that. So understanding the biochemistry, understanding the biomechanics. And then when you have that foundation, then you can use specific breath work for specific reasons. So, for example, Wim Hof, hyperventilate, hold the breath. There's a specific reason you're doing that practice. Relaxation, so resonance frequency breathing. The reason why I am doing this breath work is to maybe downregulate the nervous system. The reason why I'm doing box breathing is maybe just to rebalance a little bit, to bring a little bit of focus and concentration. So you're using specific breathing practices or breath work to create an adaptation to the body. Whereas breathing and breath awareness is more understanding the foundations of breath. Because again, as you say, I think quite often people are put off by breath work because they think, oh, I have to breathe in a particular way. The majority of the day, you don't want to be breathing in a particular way, because if we start overthinking it, it's going to stress you out if you think about every single breath we take. So I always like to differentiate the two, although obviously it's one thing. But I think when people realize the subtleties of the difference, it can make a little bit of a better understanding. Why are we doing this practice?
And so what first brought you to breathwork then, Gray? What was your kind of moment where you first realised that this is something you wanted to dive into?
I changed careers quite late on in life, sort of like early 40s. I was a graphic designer and web designer, and I was a recreational runner. And I was just seeing people really struggling with running. And I started off really struggling with running and being out of breath and not feeling comfortable with it. But running was something that back at school I used to enjoy. I used to love cross country. I liked being outdoors, getting muddy and stuff like that. So I was really interested of coming to revisiting running in my 40s, going, why is this so painful? Why is this so awful? And coincidentally, because I worked with a running coach, and the first running coach I worked with, therapist, so he worked at one of the top London hospitals, and he was working prehab, rehab with people who are having heart and lung operations and COPD, asthma, etc. So the first session I had with him, he was like, right, I'm going to check your breath rate. And I'm sat there going, why is this guy checking my breath rate? I want to learn how to run. I want running technique. So I literally sort of like fell into it in that way. And then understanding that, I found literally a book I read on the internet, or I found the book through the internet in Chi running. And I had no background in Tai Chi or Qigong or anything like that. But what I liked about the book, it was very simple. There was a lot of practical stuff in terms of, just breathe through the nose when you're running easy. And there was a few little biomechanical stuff that I took on board and found that really helped. So I found working with Robin, who is my running coach, and the Chi running book. It was literally a book. I didn't train with anybody in Chi running. That really got my interest, thinking actually how important the breath is in terms of movement. So I didn't come at it from a breath work background. I wasn't practicing, and I suppose back then there wasn't really any breath work around, to be honest, or not obviously as prolific as it is at the minute. Long story short, I trained as a Chi running coach, so I was then coaching runners, and through Robin, the running coach, he knew the Buteyko Method, and then through Danny Dreyer, who was the Chi running guru in the States, he put me in contact with Patrick McEwen, who is Oxygen Advantage. So when Patrick was writing the Oxygen Advantage, I think back in 2015, 2016, when the book first came out, Patrick contacted me because he was in Ireland, I was in London, and then we set up the first workshop together in London. And I was a PT as well, so I trained as a personal trainer, and we were dragging clients in going, look at this really great technique to help you run and help you feel better, and everybody's going, what? Breath work, like Richard said there. And then it just spiraled from there. Patrick set up his instructor training. So I went on his first instructor training program with a group of people in Ireland. It took Galway to train with Patrick. And yeah, just more and more I've worked with Oxygen Advantage, with health and fitness, running, etc. The more I realize the benefits of it, as you say there, Andrew, just how important and how powerful the breath is, and then how powerful it is when you start to explore different ways of using it. And I love that example that you gave at the beginning of chaotic breathing, because quite often a lot of breath work is, let's calm the body, let's calm the nervous system. But actually, I think it's a really important point you made there. It's like, it's great to really activate and to stress the nervous system, as long as people understand that's what you're doing, and as long as people are in a situation where they can be put through that. So I like that. So yeah, it was completely accidental, really. There was no sort of like big aha moment, I want to work in breath and stuff. It just so happened.
And so is the principle of chi running, the breath comes first then? Because I think someone like me, when I go running, I just think, well, I'll just run as a pace that I think I can do, and I don't even think about my breath, not once, until it's probably too late and I'm puffed out. So yeah, breath comes first in chi running. Is that right?
It's the breath wasn't emphasized. This is why I wanted to work with the Oxygen Advantage, and I think working with OA and developing more detailed breath work and more understanding of the breath. Chi running just focused on the basics of nasal breathe when you're running aerobically, which makes sense. So it is. I wouldn't say in Chi running. I mean, I'm not teaching Chi running anymore, but I'm not saying it. Wouldn't say the breath is at the heart of Chi running. There's a whole other things that it will bring into the practice. But that led me then to go on to learn more about Qigong. And that's where I really went, not whatever you do, whether that's running, whether that's walking, whether that's getting out of a chair, whether that's Qigong, whether it's weight training, strength training, the breath comes first. You should really follow the breath, because the breath, there's a great quote, and I can never remember who it's by. Somebody made it up or whatever. But if breathing is not normalized, no other movement pattern can be. I think it was Carell Lewis or someone like that. And I think that really highlights that if you're not breathing efficiently, you're not going to move as optimally as you can do. And that's a great example, I think, you made there, Andrew, from a perspective of running. Because so many people, if you think of what running is in sort of like real terms, if you are going to run for a reason, you're either running away from something or you're running to find something. If you just think of the real basics of it, forget about I'm running a marathon or whatever, but if you just think of the actual psychological effect that running has on you, if we are running away from something, we're going to sprint, we're going to go as fast as we can. So you're not going to worry about the breath, you're just going to go for it. Mm-hmm. But if you're training to run any distance longer than 100 meters, you really want to be planning how you manage your energy, and how you manage your energy for that distance is going to be how you manage your breath. And one thing I've noticed with myself and with clients is if you say to someone, start off walking, and then go from an easy walk, breathing in and out through the nose, and then going to a steady run without hardly changing the breath rate, it's a really nice way to ease into a run, because you don't then go into like fight or flight. And the minute you go into fight or flight, you're going to breathe hard. So it's almost like tricking your body into, I'm not running, I'm just going a little bit faster as I'm walking. So it's almost, it's good. This is going to sound weird. It's almost disconnecting the mind from the body. I know we talk a lot about mind-body connection, but if you can get in that idea of this is quite easy and quite calming and quite relaxing, face is relaxed, breathing in and out through the nose, it's almost like you can achieve more with the movement and with the body. I think a lot of athletes have that disconnection is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, whereas they can really push themselves without it feeling like, oh, this is horrendous. But if you start off really subtly and really slowly, it makes a massive difference, and it's almost like a relief to a lot of people. It's like, oh, I don't have to run really fast. It's like you build your speed by being more efficient with your movement. And the best way to work out how efficient you can move is to follow the breath. Exactly as you said there, Andrew. If you lose control of the breath, you lose control of the movement. So you gas out, and then you have to recover, then you have to start again. Now, if you're doing interval training, that's fine. Go as fast as you can, recover. Fast as you can, recover. That's a different part of training. But if you're going for anything longer than an interval training session, you should go really gently and calmly and follow the breath. That doesn't mean to say you can't be powerful, because again, when I say something like this, people think, oh, well, it's just like just running and I'm not doing really much. Watch the elites running, watch the Kenyans running, and they're not gasping for breath. Their breath is very soft, it's very quiet. They have a really low ventilatory response. So they can tolerate that increase in CO2 with a low ventilatory response, and that makes you more efficient and it makes you more powerful.
It's like doing more with less, right?
Yeah. But we like to, in the Western world, we like to do more. We like to do less with more.
It's about efficient energy needs, and it was Carol Lewitt who said that quote. Well done, you got that right.
Was it? I'm glad I remembered that.
Nailed it. Yeah. I do also want to.
There's the breath geek coming out in you, Richard. Thank you.
Well, fact checking. Yeah, I just want to make sure our guests are.
Are
of
on
course, all
fact.
our guests are 100% accurate. Would never lie. Absolutely, you can trust us, listener. I do want to talk later more about sort of dysfunctional and the Buteyko method, but yeah, let's still focus on sort of athletic performance. So, what is it? What can athletes do? Why should athletes focus on their breath, and how can they really use that to gain an advantage?
I think from athletes, whether you're talking Olympian athletes or sort of like recreational athletes or anyone into their fitness, is, as I said there, if you start with the breath. And one of the focuses one of the practices that we use in Oxygen Advantage is holding the breath. So doing like a breath hold. And it seems really counterintuitive to hold the breath to actually get more oxygen into the system. But if you think about it logically again and thinking why and what's going on biochemically, there's something called a Bohr effect. Maybe we need to fact check that.
No, it is. It's definitely. I love the Bohr effect.
I know. Which means that we need a certain amount of carbon dioxide in the blood to be able to draw oxygen from the blood. So I think quite often we think carbon dioxide is a waste gas. We just breathe it out, which it is. It's created with the respiration in the cells. But if we breathe out too much carbon dioxide, we actually can reduce the volume, the oxygen that's being delivered to the cells. And you can see that with something like a Wim Hof practice or something where you really hyperventilate. So you lower your CO2 levels, you breathe more than you need. And the harder you breathe, when you breathe more than you need, you breathe out more carbon dioxide than your body is creating. And that means that you can then hold the breath for a long period of time because you have low carbon dioxide levels. But which is a great practice. If it's safe to do so, we're always stressing things like that. If it's safe to do so, so breath holds, hyperventilation. If you're pregnant, avoid. If you've got high blood pressure, low blood pressure, etc. All of this is obviously we've got to be really careful when we're stressing the nervous system. With Oxygen Advantage, what we do is rather than lower the carbon dioxide levels so we can hold the breath for a longer period of time, we actually do the breath holds at the bottom of a normal exhale. And that just means that you get the training effect quicker. So you're actually building up the carbon dioxide levels. And there's benefits from increasing carbon dioxide levels, because first of all, it means it's almost like squeezing more oxygen out of the blood. So it's more oxygen, efficient use of oxygen uptake. And also it's giving you that mental resilience as well. So that mental tolerance to CO2, because it feels hard work when you're doing a breath hold. It should feel uncomfortable, because that is the natural response for our brain to go, hang on a minute, we need to take a breath. So it's building your tolerance, means that then when you start to exercise, whether that's weightlifting, whether that's running, is that when you do start to increase CO2 without holding the breath, because you will do when you're using more muscles and when you need more oxygen, you'll be able to tolerate that increase in CO2, which means you can push through more. And I mean, there's the research out there, but also just anecdotally, it makes a huge difference. It's almost like it's doing your cardio without pushing your body, without overstressing the musculoskeletal system. And what I love about doing some of the stuff is, if you just do that in walking, obviously with the caveat if it's safe to do so, you're doing your cardiovascular exercise. You're walking and really getting a benefit from walking, rather than having to think about pushing and breathing hard. It's just adding that little bit of a breath hold to it. And as I say, anecdotally, there's a few. I worked with a guy who was at the Tokyo Olympics, and he does breath holds. He does like a little bit of Wim Hof as well occasionally, in terms of activating the nervous system, and just notices the difference, the seconds difference.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that window of tolerance for stress is such an important thing. I think, yeah, the way I like to conceptualize the nervous system and resilience is like, yeah, some people have a really small window of tolerance for stress. They can take a little bit of stress and then it spills out over that window, and then they have anxiety, panic attacks, emotional outbursts and such things. And the really sort of, the fighter pilots and the astronauts of the world, they can take on so much stress because they have such a huge window of tolerance. And there's so many things that go into this window of tolerance. But I think CO2 is such a sort of underappreciated contributing factor to anxiety. I think it was in James Nestor's book where they talked about that study where they put carbon dioxide masks on people, and these people who'd never had panic attacks, never had anxiety, 100% of them, when they were breathing pure carbon dioxide, had panic attacks. And I think one of the jobs we're trying to do here, or one of the jobs me and you, Gray, are trying to do is convincing people of the need to do breath work. And I think explaining why CO2 tolerance is so important is so key. So can you talk a little bit more about carbon dioxide sensitivity and how that contributes to our problems?
I think you explained it really well there, actually, because just putting that mask on is making people feel anxious, because the body responds. The body has a really good buffer. So when you pause the breath or hold the breath, your oxygen levels have got to drop really low before that is dangerous. Again, unless you're really ill or anything. So that holding of the breath it's not oxygen that's lowering, that's giving you that horrible feeling of fear. I mean, it is fear. It's your body going, hang on a minute, you need to breathe. That feeling of fear comes from CO2 increasing, changing the pH in the blood, triggering the brain to say breathe. One of the first things, if you say to people, actually, that basically tell them that you're not going to run out of oxygen. And then, just knocked the mic.
It's all right.
You're not going to run out of oxygen. And a nice way of testing that is using one of those really cheap pulse oximeters. You can get a pulse oximeter. You can say to someone, look, you've got 99% oxygen in your blood. Pause the breath for 10 seconds. Oh, look, you've still got 99% oxygen in your blood. And then even if that oxygen level lowers to 80, you're still getting blood to the cells. In fact, you're still getting oxygen to the cells. In fact, you're getting more oxygen to the cells because you've got that increase of carbon dioxide pulling that blood oxygen into the cells. So give them that. And then from a mental point of view, they're going, so I can pause my breath and I'm not going to run out of oxygen. Now, if you get people to realize that, you tend to see them being able to pause their breath for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds longer than they did when they thought, I'm going to run out of oxygen. So first of all, that explanation, which I think you said there, is really important for people to understand to understand the science. So mentally, that first sign of air hunger or the first need to take a breath is not their brain going, oh no, I'm going to run out of oxygen. It's like, I can go a little bit longer with this. And then when you can then tolerate CO2 a little bit more and go to that comfortable place with a pause. So in Buteyko, we do a practice, it's called the comfortable pause or the controlled pause, where you get to the bottom of the breath. How long can you pause the breath before you feel that first distinct desire to breathe? In Oxygen Advantage, that's the BOLT score. It's like, how long can you hold the breath until that first distinct desire to breathe? And that is a really good way of, first of all, people tuning into their bodies and realizing where they're currently at with their sensitivity of CO2. And as I say, the first point is that sensitivity is quite subjective, because somebody go, I can do it for 2 seconds. But then you give them the controlled space, you give them the safe space that you're working with to say, understand this, you can go a bit longer. When you've got someone to that place, then you can say, well, what we're going to do now is we're going to challenge ourselves a little bit. So you're going to experience that fear. And that is great. We want you to experience that challenge. Again, with the caveats that it's safe to do so. So then you can do, how long can you hold the breath? How long can you hold the breath when you're walking? So it's a bit, if you imagine going into a training room and you're lifting weights, it's a bit like lifting that heavier weight. So we're creating that adaptation on the body so you can tolerate that CO2 more. Now, obviously, everybody's going to get to a point, and everybody's got to get to a point where you need to get rid of any excess CO2. So that's normal. You're never going to get to the point where we have big loads of CO2 in the blood, because that can be dangerous. But it's just bumping up our baseline of our tolerance to CO2. And like you said there, I don't know if I've gone off the question you asked me, but I think, like you said about, I think this is important, because when people are stressed, breathing tends to increase, breath rate tends to increase. So they tend to lower their CO2 levels a little bit. And then what happens is that they aren't tolerant to CO2. So the minute you get stressed, and then you might say, calm down a little bit or slow the breath a little bit. If they can't slow the breath a little bit, they're just going to feed into that stressful situation, because straight away that little bit of CO2 is making them breathe harder. So this is where the breath work comes into practice, because the more you then do slowing the breath with various techniques, resonance frequency, box breathing, that's all building tolerance to CO2 as well. Just nasal breathing is building tolerance to CO2. So that's how breath work plays into the importance. CO2 plays into and obviously oxygen, because you're oxygenating in the cells. That balance between CO2 and oxygen, the biochemistry, which often isn't taught or often isn't highlighted, is literally the key to that managing stress, whether that's physical stress or whether that's emotional stress.
I mean, that's fascinating. I'm sure that'll be music to people's ears, that they can get some of the benefits of cardiovascular activity from strategic and safe breath holds, particularly when walking to the shops or work or whatever. I was interested in another phrase I heard you use, energy cultivation through breath work. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that, because I don't quite know what that means.
Did I say that?
Energy cultivation, I believe, was the
Energy
phrase.
cultivation. I'm thinking of it from, maybe that was from sort of like a Qigong perspective, because if you think I think that's a really good question, because if you people think energy work and everything like that can be a bit woo-woo, but energy, you're literally creating energy when you are bringing oxygen into the cells. So you're breathing oxygen into them, and then you're breathing, you're taking the oxygen from the blood into the cells. So I think I know what I said. I was talking about when you build up that little boost of carbon dioxide, you're almost like getting that little bit of boost of energy. And it's a nice way to explain it to people. I think people get it if you say little pause of the breath or a little hold of the breath is like squeezing a sponge. Imagine a sponge and you're squeezing that sponge, and that's almost like squeezing energy into every single cell. And again, that's quite a nice sort of like qigong practice. And energy can just be moving stuff around the body. Do you know what I mean? It could be blood flow around the body. It could be lymphatic drainage around the body. It can be, you might have blocked energy in a shoulder because the joint is a little bit tight. So I think where I've most probably highlighted that is that if you become more energy efficient in your movement, you're using energy in a more efficient way, and you're creating energy with the breath work as well. One of the nice things that I really always take away from my chi running days, a really simple thought or concept, is that, again, if you take in terms of like a running, is we often think, I'm going to start now and I've got to run 6 miles. So in your mind, it's often like you're using energy to run 6 miles. But there are places within that run where you are issuing energy and where you're gathering energy. And that's a really nice concept to work on. And that issuing energy could be running up a hill. So this could come back to your mouth breathing. You need to breathe out a little bit more. You need to use a more active exhale to cleanse and clear any excess CO2. But actually, when you get to the brow of the hill, then you're gathering energy downhill. So you're breathing through the nose, you're breathing slowly. So you're squeezing more oxygen, you're building up that little bit of tolerance to CO2. And that's one of the sort of like visualizations I use with clients in running. It's not just energy from start to finish. Same with like during the day. It's like you don't just get up in the morning and then energy goes all the way through the day. You can replenish your energy. You can cultivate energy by 2 minutes breath work while you're in between a call or something like that. So refueling, re-energizing throughout the day as well.
Yeah, the energy word and the woo-woo stuff is a word I try to avoid because I feel like it turns a lot of people off.
I latched onto it because I'm going to forever be haunted by James Dowler, another great breath worker, picking me up on my desire for shortcuts. And when I hear a buzzword like, oh, I can get more energy, I'm all over it.
Well, again, I feel like energy is, when people use it in the woo-woo space, it's just something that people use to fill the gaps of their scientific knowledge. So when you said, like, use the example there of, a frozen shoulder, maybe that is just blocked energy in that blood flow can't get to that shoulder, so it can't heal. Or with breath work, maybe it's a gas exchange in the brain, carbon dioxide and CO2 levels are changing. So it's a chemical energy reaction, but people will just say, oh, that's energy, because they're not fully aware of the science behind it. But there was a question I wanted to ask you about CO2 tolerance, because for listeners, I'm going through the Oxygen Advantage training at the moment. But the CO2 tolerance, is it a little bit like we are developing the CO2 tolerance in the same way as you might be developing a tolerance to alcohol? The more alcohol you drink, the more alcohol you can drink. And similarly, as you expose yourself to more CO2 with the Oxygen Advantage practices, the more CO2 you can take. So is it like down regulation of synapses and things like that, and receptors in the brain and in the body, that's creating these adaptive changes that improve our life through CO2 tolerance?
Yeah, I think yes. Again, adaptation to alcohol might not be the best thing in the world. Adaptation to CO2 is beneficial.
Positive. Yeah.
So I think the way I would explain it is it's a bit like if you're going to a gym and you're lifting a weight, then you get to the point where you can safely manage the weight and build to the strength that you are capable at that moment in time. So what it isn't is that you just really build a tolerance and you can keep building that tolerance to CO2, because CO2 is too much CO2 we will have to get rid of at some point. And that's like going back to Andrew's point about nose breathing, mouth breathing. There's nothing wrong when you need to get rid of that excess CO2 to get rid of it. But yeah, it's that is your body is adapting to that increased CO2, and in fact, it's most probably pushing it back towards the norm in everyday life, because this is a study we need to check out on. But there, you can lower your CO2 tolerance just by breathing a little bit harder. Now, there might have been, again, we can check this. I think there was a Wim Hof study where when people had been doing a lot of hyperventilation for a long period of time, their CO2 levels were generally a little bit lower than normal. And so therefore their CO2 tolerance had lowered because of lots of hyperventilation. So I might be totally wrong on that. So again, I definitely heard of some study like that. So yeah, we're lifting a weight, or we're making our body adapt to that ability to manage CO2 to a certain level, and we'll all find our comfortable level. Everybody's maximum breath hold after a normal exhalation is going to get to a point and not increase. Everybody's Bolt score is going to get to sort of like a baseline. I think one of the issues I have quite a lot of the time is, going back to what you said in terms of my little bio there at the beginning, is people tend to strive a lot. So we can end up striving with our breath work, and striving with the breath work is good to some point, but we don't want to overdo it. So again, it's like getting to that point and going, right, yeah, I can manage this, and now I can explore how to make my body more efficient. So that's how I would explain it. I think hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And going to that Wim Hof study, that's one of the calls in my dissertation, I'm saying implications for future research, is let's see if doing conscious connected breathing, which is voluntary hyperventilation in and out through the mouth, normally from between 20 minutes to 3 hours. In my study, we only did 40 minutes, but I would love someone to, get a load of capnometers and see, or get people to do Bolt tests before and after a 6-week course of conscious connected breathing, and see, are we, obviously there's, my study shows there are a lot of benefits to this conscious connected breathing from an anxiety perspective, but could that anxiety be reduced even further if we were doing oxygen advantage based practices during that workshop? So hopefully someone will take that up, or someone give me the money and I'll do the research. But yeah, we'll see.
We can do it in Spain. I think that's such a good point, because again, we can focus on various practices, but I just go back to like the mouth breathing. If you blow off CO2 a couple of times, you might think, oh, I'm lowering my CO2 levels. But actually the benefits might be, you lower your CO2 levels, but they're going to come back to normal quite quickly, hopefully, if you're fit and healthy. But actually the benefits of slowing the heart rate. So there's all of these different things to take into account, as you say there. And the other thing, as I say, it's difficult to measure. You can measure your oxygen saturation with a pulse oximeter. You can measure your heart rate with a heart rate strap, but it's actually really difficult to measure your actual CO2 levels within the blood. So we're not checking our CO2 levels every day, unless, as you say, without that, the
capnometer,
capnometer. My brain went then, to actually test that.
Well, I think
most people's CO2. Sorry, go Rich.
I was just going to say, I had a meeting with a guy not long ago when I was designing my study, but he's in the process of developing a relatively cheap capnometer that could really change the game for research in future. But that's maybe a year or two away from being on the market.
What would that look like? Is that the kind of mask over the face situation?
I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember. I think it was more like something you put in your mouth, and it kind of measures it that way. But we'll have to see what they come out with.
That will be really handy again, because as you say, that starting point of knowing, if you do lots of hyperventilation, it's a bit like training, isn't it? If your heart rate increases and then your heart rate recovers very quickly, then that's great, because you're fit and healthy. It's a bit like you lower your CO2 levels and then they come back to normal CO2 levels quite quickly. That's great. But if they don't quite come back to normal CO2 levels, and that's where, as you say, that type of kit would be really, really useful to check out on. But there is a simple way of checking your comfort with CO2 levels, and that is the Bolt score and the controlled pause, because that isn't that shouldn't be fearful. That shouldn't be like, oh, this feels horrible. It should be, where am I comfortable at this stage with it? So, as you say, if you've got a good sort of like Bolt score CP after a normal exhale, then at that stage, that is giving you a measure of where your CO2 levels are. But again, it's very subjective. I know people who go, oh yeah, I feel fine with that, and they've pushed it a little bit too far, or they haven't pushed it enough. So it is still quite subjective. That first distinct desire to breathe is quite a challenging one, and it will vary. It'll vary during the day. It'll vary whether you're dehydrated, how you've slept, how stressed you are. Females, luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, breath rate increases naturally. So that is going to play in, maybe have an effect on that comfortable pause as well. So,
yeah, well, the Bolt score, do you think we could do a little Bolt test for our listeners? Maybe Andy and I could do one and see how we get on.
Because I was actually going to ask what a Bolt test is. So, yeah, is that something you'd be willing to show me, Ray?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, what is great about OA and what is great about Patrick is everybody can bring their own sort of like tilt or angle to doing various exercises and various tests. So I might do it slightly differently to how Patrick does it. And I use the comfortable pause, because I actually think a pause makes a difference. Because if I ask you to hold something, there's a very deliberate, just going to hold that glass. So it's an active practice, if you like. If we pause, it means you can have a little rest. So it straight away has a slightly different, I think, in terms of how our mind works, is just having a rest. So the idea is that I'll explain it first and then we'll have a little practice, is we don't change the way we're breathing at all. So we don't take a full breath in or a full breath out. We just breathe normally, in and out through the nose. And then when we get to the bottom of just a regular exhale, regular bottom of the breath, you'll notice usually there's a little pause anyway, because there's that lull, there's that turnaround before you breathe in. And then all we do is, when you get to that little lull at the bottom of the breath, is go, right, now I'm just going to control that a little bit. And I'm going to control that pause until I get that first sort of like distinct desire to take a breath. And that next breath, a little bit bigger, but it should still be calm. It should still be relaxed. If we go anywhere beyond that and you're gasping for breath, then it's actually, you've gone that little bit too far. So do you want to have a little go at that? Shall I talk you through it?
Just before, that's the bit I always find a little bit confusing. Like, what signals should we take to breathe in, and where's the line between, you've held your breath too long because you've taken a massive breath after, and because I always feel like I probably should have held it a little bit longer.
So if I'm teaching this to a group, I won't say to you, I want you to feel this, because I like to see what everybody feels. So that's why it's quite nice to say, I'm not saying the first physical desire to breathe. It's like, what is your first distinct desire to breathe? And then I will go around the group and say, well, what was it? And there's no right or wrong answer. And somebody say, well, I don't know. I just needed to take a breath. Or someone else might say, oh, well, I actually felt it in the throat. Oh, felt the diaphragm go a little bit. So they feel a physical sensation. So I think to start off with, it's letting people explore that without thinking, what should I be feeling? And this is this is why it's a difficult challenge, because it's easy for me to say to you, and which is what I will do afterwards as well. It's easy to say, normal breath in, normal breath out. Right. Go for a maximum pause, push it, go, 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 go. But you still have to breathe in and out through the nose. Really feel it. Breath in, breath out. That's quite easy to do, because it's saying, how long can you hold your breath for almost? This is so subtle. And this is why if you go on Facebook and you go on Instagram, there's so many questions about about bolt, because you are literally, we want to see what your current tolerance is to CO2, and only you can feel that. And as I say, you can give people slightly different cues and they can increase it. Like I realized pause. I'll tell you, I'm coming back to this. I know you asked that question. The why I changed the word from hold to pause is I was working with a client and we were doing it outdoors and we were doing walking. So I was going, normal breath in, normal breath out. See how many steps you can take. Hold the breath for how many steps. She was really struggling with it. She said, I can't do it. I can't do it. I get 2 or 3 steps and it just feels horrible. And we were just walking along. So, so just normal breath in, normal breath out, relax into it. Just pause for a few steps. And she's going, and she completely, that word changed what her first distinct desire to breathe was. So that for me is the subtlety of it and the nuance of it. And just telling people, oh, it's not oxygen you're running out of. CO2 is sending that signal. Wow, I can go a little bit longer on it.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's run this little test, and maybe listeners can run along with it. So, yeah, Gray, if you want to talk us through it, and keep talking as we're holding our breath, so we don't have any dead air. Maybe you can just count or something like that. But yeah, over to you, Gray.
Bit of dead air is quite handy sometimes.
We can edit it out, but
yeah,
listeners,
just cut it out. Just put a timer on. I'll do that.
Yeah,
so I'll do this as I would normally do it in any sort of like situation without explaining it, what I've just explained there. So I'd say just get yourself comfortable in a comfortable position. Now you're both sitting, so that's absolutely fine. Yeah, you can have a little stretch or a little twist if you want to first, because that's quite good. This is not about holding a position. It's not about being rigid, but just have your feet in contact with the ground and just feel stable on the chair that you're sitting. Andrew's already relaxed there. He's got his eyes closed. He's chilling out.
He's fallen asleep.
It's actually quite a good thing. It's quite nice to think of a strong spine. So we have a really strong backbone, but it is great to relax the face. So just softening and relaxing into the brow and softening and relaxing into your eye sockets. And yeah, if you want to close your eyes, that's absolutely fine. And softening into the cheekbones and the jaw. And we're going to start off just by bringing awareness to the breath. And the easiest place to notice the breath is just in the nostrils, in the nose. You can naturally feel that air just gently, softly flowing in and out through the nose. We're not changing the way we're breathing. We're not trying to breathe in any particular way. Just breathing naturally in and out through the nose. And if you really pay attention, you can maybe notice the change in temperature. So as you breathe in, that slightly cooler air. As you're breathing in, even if you're indoors, you can just feel that change in temperature. And also, you can pay attention to the space between each of the breaths. So if you notice at the top of the breath, there's just that gentle change of directions, that little lull at the top of the breath. And the same thing as you get to the bottom of the breath, just notice that a little bit of a lull, a little bit of space at the bottom of the breath. And what I'd like you to do is, in a moment when I ask you, is just you get to the space at the bottom of the breath, and I want you to pause at the bottom of the breath that little bit longer. So increase that space, increase that pause at the bottom of the breath, and keep it comfortable, but just see how far you can go with that as a controlled pause. And then when you get to the point where you feel, yep, I need to take a breath, this is fine, then you just let that breath just naturally flow back in and out. So just in your own time, after that normal exhale, just take a pause. And then when you get to the point where you think, yeah, that's great, that's fine, that's enough, you feel that first distinct desire to take a breath, just breathe in. And that breath will be slightly fuller when you take that next breath. I think Richard's still going there, still got his eyes closed, still relaxed. But that's great. So, I mean, what is great about doing Zoom stuff as well, or Zoom online stuff, is you can really see people. So you can see the size of the breath they take next. I mean, obviously you can in person, but it's easier to look at you on camera than stare at you in a room. So that's one of the benefits of doing things online. So if you feel that natural flow in. So what triggered you, Andrew? What was your first distinct desire to breathe?
I almost felt my throat sort of tightening in a way towards the back of the throat, and I felt that it was sort of like it was almost visualizing gulping for air through the mouth. But actually, when I took my breath, I didn't open my mouth. So, but it was almost like a kind of tightening of the throat, which was a bit uncomfortable to say the least.
So it should again we're going to comfortable. So you're getting on the edge there. So you're going towards uncomfortable a little bit there. Rich, what did you feel?
Yeah, well, as I said, when I've done it in the past, I've always felt like, oh, was that a clear sign? I don't know. I feel like I could hold it for longer. So I did push it a little bit, and then I normally when I do it, so maybe you can explain, what was a good amount of time, a healthy range. Normally mine's like 15 to 20 seconds, but today I went to like 32 seconds just because I thought, I'll push it whilst Gray's here because he can tell me.
Showing off.
Well, partly showing off, partly being like, okay, let's see what happens if I test this, because I've got an actual instructor to tell me whether or not I did it right, and who saw my inhale afterwards. So that's probably the longest bulk test I've had, because I did just hold it a little bit more, and I did feel a little bit of just pressure in my stomach. That's what gave me the cue.
Well, certainly you both look comfortable because you can see it in the face, and I think the setup is quite important, because if you set it up as sort of like a test and do you know what I mean? And this is really important that you have a good bolt score, then you can stress people out because you're giving them a little bit of performance anxiety. So I do think that and I obviously did it a little bit quicker than I would do normally. I do think that setup is important. And yeah, both of you look great there. I think that trigger, the sense in the belly, the sense in the throat is the nerve, is the brain sending that signal down the phrenic nerve to say activate and breathe. So both of you are feeling physical sensations there. As I say, quite often people don't get to that physical point at the beginning. It is literally their brain going, I need to take a breath. Now, it might be underlying physical sensations, but I think, as you said there, Richard, I think if you realize you can get to the point where you feel a physical sensation, for me, that is, I would say, where you're at the right sweet spot. So the more you can sort of like calm your mind to think, this is relaxing, this is great, that can send the signal, that calmness and that stillness can send the signal to go a little bit longer as well. And it's a difficult one from the point of view of what's a good bolt score and what's not a good bolt score. And I know, again, when you go on the internet, there's everybody going, oh, it should be 40, it should be 12. And the thing is, what I find is if somebody's got if somebody can do it for like 12, 20 seconds and they suddenly go, oh, somebody else can do it for 40 seconds, then immediately they feel they've failed. And the last thing you want to do from the point of view in terms of breath work is start labeling people to say, you are a dysfunctional breather. And yes, it's important to understand where we can help people and where, if there are certain things that are dysfunctional, that we can help improve that. But I just back off a little bit by really setting targets, particularly with the bolt score. I think you can set targets with other things. So we could set targets with maybe push it a little bit. Say your bolt, what you're finding here is 12 seconds. Right, now let's see how far we can go with a maximum breath hold. And then if your maximum breath hold is 60, well, hang on a minute. If you're going to that much as a maximum, maybe you can push your bolt score a little bit up. So I will do sort of like the contrast of the two. And I think the other really important thing is when I'm working with people, I know we're talking about breath work, but I'm not just looking at bolt score. So if I get someone to do this every morning, I'll say, right, what's your resting heart rate? If they're checking heart rate variability, what is your heart rate variability? How do you feel? Give yourself a score in how you feel in the morning. So there's all of these other things that play into that sort of like readiness, resilience, etc. Not just this one measurement. So I think it's important to bring all of those other elements in as well.
That touches on something else I was going to ask you, actually. It sounds like you work with quite a wide variety of people. Is there a common thread as to why they come to you, or is it just as simple as hey, look, I want to optimize my breath to help me perform in whatever field they're in?
I think there's sort of like two areas. I mean, I have the privilege to be doing the teacher training, so that's fantastic because I meet people like Richard and people like yourself, and the clients who are coming by teacher training usually have a really good background in breath or understand breath, movement, or fitness trainers. So they're coming from that point of view of realizing, exactly as you said at the very beginning, Andrew, how important breath is in everything else we do. So if you're a personal trainer, if you get an understanding of how breath in movement, how breath in breath work works, then that's going to be a real advantage. It's going to boost your toolkit. It's going to boost your training credibility, etc. So that's the one type of client. If I'm working sort of like with groups who aren't doing the teacher training, to be honest, most people aren't coming for breath work. They're coming to actually feel a little bit better, get a little bit fitter. So I do quite a few retreats that aren't just breathwork retreats. So that whole breathwork is the foundation of that. But at the same time, I do teach breathwork almost alone. Well, no, that's most probably the wrong thing to say. I don't teach just breathwork alone because I will incorporate it with some type of movement or some type of walking or some type of running. So I think breath is sort of like the added element to it, because not many people think, oh, I don't breathe very well. They think, oh, I don't feel good and I could really do with getting out more and moving a little bit more. So again, that's sort of like one, how I market it rather than just breathe better. It's like, how can you feel better? How can you move better? How can you optimize your energy?
Yeah.
I'll use that
What
one.
did I say? Energy cultivation.
Energy. I can't even remember saying that. I need to watch this back.
False
possible.
accusation. Fact checked, Andy.
That'd be good, wouldn't it? I might do that every week. I might just misquote a guest.
And see what they say.
You said something horrific here. Like, what? Good. So the other kind of arm of Oxygen Advantage is the Buteyko Method. Do you teach much about Buteyko and real dysfunction? And I know Patrick, by the way, Patrick McEwen, he's the founder of the Oxygen Advantage. He's sort of a big deal in the breathwork world, written several books, The Oxygen Advantage, The Breathing Cure, and he's got another one coming out soon. But his whole thing was he had terrible ADHD and it was all caused by his dysfunctional breathing. So yeah, can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think it was asthma actually. So he had really bad asthma when he was younger and was hospitalized with asthma and was seeing various specialists and doctors, etc., and couldn't find a cure or couldn't find anything that really helped. And that's when he, I don't know how he discovered the Ukrainian doctor Buteyko, and he was. Again, it was in Cold War time, so there wasn't a lot of information coming out of the USSR. But he was finding that a lot of his patients were breathing hard and were so low CO2 levels. And it's a bit like chicken and egg, isn't it? Is it because they were ill that they were breathing hard and had low CO2 levels, or were there illnesses and ailments because they were breathing hard and had low CO2 levels? But Patrick trained then with Dr. Buteyko, trained in the Buteyko method, and found that it really helped with his asthma because he was building tolerance to CO2. So when he was having an asthma attack, he was breathing hard, so lowering his levels, so managing that asthma attack. And again, it's not saying it's the magic bullet. It's not saying it's the cure-all. It's not us saying, oh, well, stop using any medication. Obviously, if you're using medication and you've been prescribed medication, it's not to stop that medication, but it was helping. And it stopped. Patrick didn't have to then use medication from that. And anecdotally, one of the few coaches I work with, someone who works with me in Scotland, she had severe asthma, and it has really helped her with asthma as well. And then that's how he got involved in Buteyko. And then the basis of OA is Buteyko is about understanding the biochemistry. So a lot of the practices that we do in Oxygen Advantage are the practices that we do in Buteyko. I think the difference is, or if there is a difference really, I don't really, if I'm teaching, because I trained in both and I tend to teach both elements. I take, like I was saying with a controlled pause, I'll take both elements. But there was a lot more understanding of the science in Buteyko, and it's more aimed towards, if I can say, patients rather than clients. So I remember the first course I did with Patrick, you were having people who were really struggling with like walking up the stairs or with anxiety. So you are a little bit more involved with people who are a little bit more wanting to work on really getting that functional breathing working. But having said that, a lot of athletes, what they need is that functional breathing first point, and it's not the sexy bit, it's not all the breath holds, but they can push themselves. So it's how can you then bring yourself to really work on that foundation.
Nice. Yeah, I think going back all the way to what is breathwork, I know when people came into my study, they were like, "Oh, this is not what I was expecting at all." There's, we were getting people into non-ordinary states of consciousness, doing healing. I think a lot of people, when they hear breathwork, they either think, right, it's going to be making me breathe better, like the oxygen advantage, or they think it's going to be controlled breathing, box breathing and down regulation breathing and things like that. But yeah, a big theme of our podcast is about navigating wellness. Obviously, it's in the title, and we say that because it's so difficult to know about wellness. Everyone's saying different things. Everyone's, these days, so many people are into wellness, and all my old friends that Andy and I kind of grew up with when I was doing this stuff 15 years ago, they were, laughing me out of the pub effectively. And now they're all into it. Everyone's into these things these days. But what do you think people are getting wrong in wellness? What are people getting wrong in wellness or in breath work? Where do people think they're doing something right, but they're actually doing something wrong?
I think if it's some, again, it's quite a black and white question. I think often people try too hard. So I think that could be, say, doing something wrong, and then they beat themselves up because they can't do it. So it goes back to that strive and thrive, is they're constantly setting a goal, really pushing towards that goal, maybe attaining it, but then what's the next goal? Or maybe not attaining it and then feeling that they've failed. And that's not in the least saying it's not important to have goals and have framework and have structures. But I think sometimes we can be too structured in our training and too structured even in breath work. And where I think we need to give a little bit, allow ourselves to be a bit more intuitive. So a lot of breath work is intuitive. I'm thinking like Andrew Huberman, physiological sigh. We do that. And then when people realize that that's something intuitive that you do, then we add on to that why that is beneficial, what it's doing to the nervous system. The other intuitive I'm thinking of is like recovery position. So naturally, if you're really stressed out, you'll go into a recovery position, you put your hands on your knees, you'll do a few big breaths, and then you'll calm the breath that way. Now, people go, oh, no, that's wrong. You should breathe in like this. You should stand tall to recover. But actually, again, there was a study on female football players in both of those positions, and they found that the recovery position that you would naturally do, intuitively do, would bring the heart rate down quicker. And again, anecdotally, I've done that with myself and I've done that with clients. So I think what is intuitive to us is often missed. Nasal breathing. It's like, I remember doing a session and I was talking about nasal breathing, and somebody said, oh, I'm new to this. I've never done any breath work. What do you mean by nasal breathing? And I'm like, that's a really good question. All it is doing exactly what we're all doing now, shutting our mouths and breathing through the nose. It's nothing, we're not doing anything particular nasal breathing. So if we are naturally nasal breathing, which to be fair, the majority of people are doing a lot of the time. So if you do like a group Zoom and you get them all just to sit and focus on the breath, it's very unusual that anybody's got their mouth open. Nobody's going to be going unless they're really ill. So nasal breathing doesn't have to be anything that's unusual or just suddenly discovered through James Nestor and Patrick McEwen. It's something that we do if we relax our jaw, have a little smile on our face and breathe, basically. So I think that intuitive element is something that's missing. The other thing I think sometimes we get wrong is we sort of like have hard exercise, which is all about pushing and running and weightlifting, and then soft exercise, which is qigong and breathwork and yoga. But all of that needs to combine together. And again, the idea with qigong is you have that combination of strength and softness. So without that combination of strength and softness, you don't build resilience. So think about like a tree grows, there's a real strong root, but actually there's a softness, there's a fluidity, there's a flexibility to that tree. Otherwise it would die, or otherwise it would break. So that combination of strength and softness will build resilience. So I think if we combine that into our practice, having that awareness, and then if I'm creating a training program, I use James Clear, the Atomic Habits. Really nice book, really simple way of building habits. So I'm thinking of a corporate company I work with. They're not going to go and do 20 minutes breath work. There's just no way they're going to do it. But if they do a physiological sigh and then just focus on relaxing the face, so their nasal breathing, and they do that for 30 seconds, they're on like a call center. They do that for 30 seconds between each call. You've done like 20 minutes breath work during the day. You've done that little reset during the day. And that works. If I give a group something like that to do, they'll come back and go, oh, that's amazing. I can calm my nervous system in one breath. And so those tiny, tiny little things, attaching habits, creating stacking habits is a really good way of developing a framework for training. So to achieve in a good way, to keep motivated, but not to push too hard. And I know it's that fine line. It's like the Bolt score. It's like just find that sweet spot where you're at. Use that, enjoy that, cultivate that, thrive in that space. Don't be disappointed because you haven't gone that little bit higher, because what you might find is then suddenly there's that leap forward.
I'm really glad you just said that, Gray, because one of my common themes when we're talking to guests is sort of barriers to entry and how you kind of put this stuff into your daily life. And that seems like a really simple and effective way to get a real benefit from the breath. That, I mean, hopefully everyone's got 30 seconds worth of time during the day to do that sort of thing. And it's great to hear that there are things like that out there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the Huberman study and the physiological sigh, because obviously that physiological sigh, for people who don't know, you take an inhale in through the nose, and then you take in like a double inhale, which supposedly pops up the alveoli. But I spoke to a doctor the other day who said, no, that's not how the lungs work at all. But beside the point, the study showed that people's anxiety levels were reduced. But a big part of the oxygen advantage is we shouldn't overbreathe, and overbreathing and taking those big sighs. I think I remember in the Oxygen Advantage, after yawning, Patrick recommends you hold your breath for 10 seconds. So after those physiological sighs, do you recommend that people do a little bit of breath retention?
You could do a little bit of breath retention, or what I will do is I will just say, just be aware of just slow, light, gentle breathing. I think the side, this is a fascinating point, and it's a point that I've often had with OA instructors. If we are fit and healthy and we take a couple of big breaths and our CO2 levels come back to normal, there is nothing dangerous in that. Do you know what I mean? So what I don't want people to do is to start restricting their breathing. So to suddenly go, oh, I can't sigh, or I can't breathe up here, because then we become tight and we become tense. We need that release, that cleanse and clear. So a couple of it just feels good. The issue is, again, if you look at when we think about maybe dysfunctional breathing, if you're constantly doing that, it means your nervous system is going, hang on a minute, I need to find balance. It's a bit like that chaotic breathing. It's what you're sort of like doing in the exercises where we're deliberately stressing the nervous system. So frequent sighing could be a sign of dysfunctional breathing. A physiological sigh is just like, oh, it's lovely, it's morning. That's nice. Oh, doesn't it look great out there? It's almost that feeling. And that's how if I'm guiding it, that's how I would guide it. And the study he did, I think, and I may be wrong on this, because he then looked at cyclical sighing. And this is interesting because when I'm doing the cyclical sighing, I don't do loud, big breaths. I will do. No, you can't see me going.
We can't hear that on the mic.
And that's difficult because then how do you teach that? Like, let's all sit here doing that. And let's do it as a. So it's quite often breath work is like, there's an in breath, there's a top up, there's an out breath. So everybody starts breathing really hard, but you can do cyclical sighing just really gently. And again, this is anecdotal, so it's not tested or anything, but everybody's heart rate variability varies in different practices. But I can increase my heart rate variability in real time by doing some very gentle cyclical sighing, as opposed just to 4-6 breath or resonance frequency. There is something in that top-up breath. I'd be interested to find out about that, because there is something very refreshing, whether you feel it or not, about that top-up breath. And everybody says it. Well, everybody I've worked with will go, yeah, oh, that little top-up is a real... there's just something. So I want to know that, doctor. I want to get some... that would be a good thing to explore a little bit more about what actually is happening. Because I will explain it, I think, like Andrew Huberman does. It's like blowing up a balloon. That first blow... it blows up a bit, but it's that where it suddenly expands. And I think that's what's happening, isn't it? That you suddenly get that feeling of openness when on that top up.
There's so much research that needs to be done on breathwork. Like in my PhD, I sent it off to my dissertation chair. They're like, I'm sort of making things up, and they're like, is there any research to back up what you said? No. Is there any research to back up what you said? No. And I just, everything is, someone needs to fill this gap in knowledge. So if anyone's listening and they want to help me set up a research lab at a university, get in touch. I'm available.
I think the difficult thing as well with research is, as you say, like just the mere fact that you said research lab, is putting someone into a situation where it is research. But actually, you might feel completely different doing that breath work that we give you walking in a forest as opposed to sat looking at a screen. And this is the subtlety. And this, for me, is the exciting bit, because, yeah, we want the science and we want the research to back stuff up. But ultimately is, how do people feel and how do you respond to that situation? Understanding what we know so far with the research. And that research is always going to develop and is going to change. And I like the fact that it's not black and white, and that the research, the data we get back from our clients, their feedback is all data. So I know it's not research in the terms of research, but it gives you that understanding of what people are feeding back to you. And when you see people's faces change by, oh yeah, just breathe through the nose, or physiological sigh once in a while, that for me is the data as well that we're getting feedback on.
Yeah, and I would say that they are changing with the term lab. Yes, it kind of conjures up the pictures of white lab coats and Bunsen burners, but and of course there is the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect. People change their behavior when they're being observed. That's what makes people using MyFitnessPal so effective for weight loss. But I don't know if you've seen the psychedelic research or the videos on Netflix, but they're doing research in labs there, and the labs are like these really nice rooms full of flowers and relaxing music, and people are doing psychedelic trips there in very nice settings, almost as close to nature as a lab would get. So yeah, for sure, I take that point. But if I was to do a breathwork study, I would make sure I would do it in a nice lab, etc.
But then that's interesting, because we do it in a nice lab in a nice setting. But then how would you respond with the same protocol in a stressful situation, in a setting that isn't nice, in like a cold, damp room. So all of that's going to affect the mind, isn't it? And how you breathe.
Yes, threats to construct validity would be the nerdy term for that.
Oh, that's a good. I like that.
Yeah, there you go.
It's better than my energy conservation.
Yeah. So, moving towards the end, you and I are putting on a retreat in Spain, aren't we? So, do you want to tell people a little bit more about what we're going to be doing there?
So, in Spain, which is the 24th to the 29th of September, we're doing an Oxygen Advantage instructor retreat, and it's part of the Oxygen Advantage training program. So, what I've found is that teaching the teachers or training coaches, a retreat environment is a beautiful, brilliant place to do it, or a very brilliant environment to do it. Just as we've just said there, just Rich said there, it's a really good environment. I find it a really creative environment, a good place, a really good learning environment. And what is fantastic about Spain is it's an old farmhouse. We've got the full use of the farmhouse. Lovely couple. I went out there just before Christmas to see the venue, who are actually Belgium, and they bought the farmhouse in Spain. So they were nurses, both nurses, and they just like changed careers, brought all the family over, the kids over, and it's just a brilliant atmosphere, wonderful atmosphere, lovely people, great food. We had lots of good food there that they cooked for us. And what I normally do is we normally do 4 days training. We've gone a little bit longer on this because Richard is going to be there. And what is going to be great about this is we're going to be doing most of the sort of like Oxygen Advantage training, learning processes in the mornings. We haven't sorted the full schedule out yet, but it's going to give us afternoons to do some of the conscious connected breathing with Richard. There's some fantastic trails, so we can do some trail walks, or if you want to do a little bit of trail running, walk running. Literally, as you walk out the door, you've got a trail, and literally around the side there's a trail. Beautiful at night, because I was out at night, and there's no light pollution, so you see the sky. There's an outdoor pool. And we've got the studio that we'll be working in is literally just outside, is by the side of the outdoor pool. So you've just got doors looking onto this outside pool where we'll be doing sort of like the learning practice. And there's an indoor sauna as well. So it's a retreat element where you are learning, but you're also experiencing. So every morning we'll do the Qigong, 7:30 outside. That's an experience for you, and then we'll be learning the teacher training in the Oxygen Advantage. And you don't just get the retreat as well. So what is fantastic about how Patrick works is any of the coaches who are instructor training, anybody who trains with me or any of the other instructors get access to all of his online training as well. So you get 7 hours 14 hours. You get seven classes with Patrick online, Zoom online. So he will really delve into the science. I think that's what Richard's going through now, going through the classes with Patrick. And there's a lot of support materials, so loads of videos and stuff. So it's not just the retreat. You don't just get 4 days and then bye-bye, or 4 days and you're certified. There's a whole other host of online training materials. And the other thing is what I feel my role is not just as a coach and a teacher trainer, but is really facilitating and helping people once you're motivated to get through that whole certification process. So I will make sure that we have regular catch-ups afterwards the retreat. I work with another master coach, Andrew Ritchie. We do Scotland together. Andrew's going to be coming to do some of the Spain retreat. We do regular catch-ups every 4 to 6 weeks. We'll just have a Zoom call. Anybody who's trained with us over the years can jump in on that Zoom call and ask questions. So I really think it's important to have that community as well and have that support rather than just going, there you are, you're certified, off you go. We'll always be there to support you as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, good luck, Rich. I hope you do well there.
Thank you.
Don't let us down.
No, of course not.
One more thing I have to ask you, I'm afraid, Gray, being that it's the modern era, is where do people find you? Can we get you on social media? Is there a website?
Yep, you can. The website is adventuresinmovement.com. And I do have a link, because what I've done, I did do a link for the Spain training, because what I tend to do is people want to chat through it. So I do like a 30-minute call. If anybody wants to link to that and book a call with me and have a little chat with me on that. It's not a sales call. I'm not a salesman. This is about, it's really important to make sure things fit for you. This training might not be right for you. So if it's not right for you, you'll find another way, another style of training. I might not be the right coach to help you through this process. So I really, really do emphasize that. So we can share a link to that if you want.
Well, I think I have a referral
podcast.
code, don't I? Maybe I'll put that link in the show notes and on my Instagram link in bio, so people can. There's a discount, right, if they come through my referral code?
Yes. So there's a 10% discount if they come via your referral code. And actually, Richard, I'll give you the one to this, because I've created a page that will literally go to a booking calendar for a call. So
okay, nice.
I'll give you that link as well, so you can pop that in there.
Great.
Instagram is Gray Caws, GRAYCAWS, and Facebook and the website is Adventures in Movement.
Great.
Thank you very much, Gray. Fantastic insight, and so great to learn from you. So thank you very much for giving up your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate Andrew and Richard, you both asking me to join you. I do appreciate it. Thank you for your time too.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Gray. Thank you, listener. Remember, like us, subscribe us, write us a review if you like. Follow us on Instagram. I'm at the Breath Geek, and Andy is going to be doing more on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, follow Andy Esam to keep up with what's going on at Laughing Through the Pain. All right. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.